Perfect. We are live. Always have that awkward newscaster waiting for everything to load up. Yeah, there you go. There you go. We welcome everyone. We're going to stall just for a couple seconds here and let everyone log in. 1 minute after, we've got about a third of the registrants in the room already. So thank you so much for spending either your morning with us or potentially your lunch hour. We've got a jam-packed webinar for you to share as much as possible. Good morning, Jeffrey Can. Thanks for joining. That's awesome. So Jeffrey brings up a great point. On your right-hand side, you'll see a chat, and that is how we're going to request everyone to communicate with us today. We do have everyone's mics muted, and even though you can ask to speak, we're going to just request all questions, all information come through the chat mode. And once Brett and I have gone through our solutions, then we will go to Q&A. Also, you'll notice on the right-hand side, we have files that we're sharing. So we have PCS's Epilogue Solution Overview. We've got Vintri's Asset Data Best Practices and our Vintri brochure. That's for you to download it at your courtesy, as well as, of course, you can always reach out to us for more information. Well, I've got more than half the registrants in the room now. So, Brett, if you're good, I think we should kick it off.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So, for those of you that read our early promotions and saw our LinkedIn posts, you're probably noticing that there's only 2 talking heads on this screen instead of 4. Unfortunately, our partners at TC Energy, Dan Ma and Suki Gill, were not able to join us today due to an unforeseen conflict. However, they've been great about this. They have pointed out some great alternatives for you. So they have done a very similar presentation to this with us through the SEPA Foundation. So if you're with an organization that is a member of the SEPA Foundation, you do have access to a recording of a similar presentation where you can hear Dan and Suki speak about these 2 solutions directly. And that is available on the SEPA Foundation SharePoint. So if you're a member and you don't know how to access that, or your company is a member of SEPA Foundation, you don't know how to access that, you can email innovation@sepa.com, and the parties over there will help you access that video. As well, I did see in our registration list, we are very fortunate to have some operators and engineering firms joining us today. For those of you that were really hoping to hear directly from another operator how and why they use these solutions, we do have the capability of, if you reach out to Brett or myself, Dan and Suki have agreed to set up a one-on-one conversation with you to take you through any of this. And then for anybody that is part of TC Energy, of course, you can reach out to Suki and Dan and get a private Teams webinar solution, either of one of these solutions at a time or both of them. Brett and I are pretty flexible on that front. We can talk about them in one session or on their own. So I hope that still meets everyone's needs. You're still going to see some great solutions, understand how a data material management and traceability solution feeds into a construction management tool and field data management solution. And we can still reference how it happens on TC Energy projects, just not showing you exact TC Energy data by any means, just all sample fake data for today. So, Brett, did I miss anything there?
I think you got it.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to start our slides here. Sorry, I did miss something. I didn't introduce Brett. I just keep referencing you. So I'm Jeff Boyle with Vintri Technologies, and I've got Brett Vogt with Project Consulting Services, also known as PCS. And he's going to be taking over the second half of this, showing you their system Epilogue.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for joining me today, Brett. It's great to have multiple solutions in one webinar for participants to take in.
Absolutely, I agree.
So real quick, for those of you who don't know, Vintri Technologies is a Calgary-based organization with a Houston satellite office. We work with midstream and upstream operators around the world, as well as their suppliers that supply the assets for both major transmission lines as well as for facilities. And our whole world is around making sure that energy infrastructure data is accurate, accessible, and traceable. And we do that through industry-specific data preparation tools. So many different QA/QC algorithms within the software to make sure that everyone, including a great system like Epilogue, can have access to that material data. As I mentioned, today's presenters, myself with Vintri Technologies and Brett Vogt. And I'm a visual person, so always like to bring up this small infographic to take everyone through the pathway. So here at Vintri, we've taken the lifespan of material data and broken it down into 10 critical stages. So today I'm going to be showcasing and talking about stage 1 to 4, right from the inception and birth certificate of an asset through to being able to see all of your manufacturing data as it goes through its different iterations before it gets sent over. Stage 5 is, of course, that transition where on many TC Energy projects, we have the opportunity to have Vintri Core, our platform output, be sent directly over to Brett and his team at PCS and uploaded into the Epilogue system, so that is then accessible for everyone in the field. So that's stage 5, and then Brett will kind of take you through a full overview of the construction. On his side, it's not specifically 6, 7, and 8, but seeing his presentation before, he does have a lot of great information to show you on the capture side within 6, and also the turning data into information and then insight in stage 8. So that's what we're going to take you through today. Again, one last reminder, if you have any questions whatsoever, please throw them in the chat bar on the right-hand side. We do really enjoy making this as interactive as possible. Our goal is to go through these solutions quite briskly and leave as much time as possible at the end for Q&A. We will try to have the presentations wrapped within 30 minutes, and then we'll take the Q&A for as long as they go, wrapping at an hour hard stop. As well, if you have to jump out, because you're a participant and registrant, you will be sent a link with a recording of this video, and as well as this video will be within the week made available on Vintri's YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'm going to just highlight one more thing that we haven't been highlighting on the Vintri webinars, and we wanted to just share with the industry out there some of the significant changes. So everything we're talking about from a Vintri perspective in stage 1 to 4 is essentially the record of materials. And for the most part, record of materials within our industry has gone through many different phases, stages, changes, and it's got a lot of influences. One of them that has significantly picked up recently is the regulatory changes around the record of materials. So just for those tuning in, you may or may not be seeing a lot of the different reports around the PHMSA final rule, which is 1/3 of what was spoken about for a very long time, the mega rule. And what was published in October actually had some very critical components within it. And it talked about in 192.67, it talked about what we all know as PHMSA's TVC, traceable, verifiable, and complete. And it added a significant line there where it said complete and accurate. So that's talking about the material data for pipe and components of a pipeline. They also added quite a bit of verbiage around just the material records required around pipeline components, the test records, the verification records, and the welding records. So there's a great deal of valuable information out there We follow a lot of the different consulting groups that are tracking this, and a report that just came up recently showed that while this was supposed to take effect July 1st, it has been for most operators pushed back to January 1st. But a lot of these changes are taking effect now, and that's why there's a major push on getting all of your records for your materials in a usable and accessible format, especially from the API 5L perspective, the initiative around a truly digital MTR. So that's the quick update of just changes on that side. And now I'm going to take you through our system and just show you the data as it flows from the steel up to the asset and over into the construction management tool. So I've got Vintri Core open here, and we've got our asset classes. So we'll go into our steel, and I can click on any one of these instead of doing a direct search, because if anyone follows all of our webinars, that doesn't always go well when you're copying and pasting. But we have just a simple asset here, and what we wanted to take you through is just some of the high level data that we can have on a heat specifically. To some of you, that might not mean a lot, but what's really important is we've got this heat information, this raw material data, and then we, within our system, have all of the assets that heat belongs to. So we're able to, from inception up to the next round of pipe, be able to go into, and we can see it in a small snapshot, or we can see it in a large snapshot. We can see all of the assets that belong to that heat. And then we're able to dive into that specific asset. So we're going to go up one level now, and we're going from raw material up to its first version of an asset. So bare steel pipe. And while I'm still in the heat, I can quickly see a snapshot of the pipe and its different attributes, or I can actually double click and go right into that asset itself. So when I go into that asset itself, I now have the ability to see its summary data, which is a lot of the critical information that we passed over to Brett's solution, as well as we've got our mill information. This is a PUP. This is not a double joint, so we don't have coding information on this. It hasn't been coded yet. And so to take us there, what we can go to is we can go up to the multi-joint. Really quickly, while I'm looking at that, just to come back to the steel information, now that we're at pipe, we can see the product details again, we can see the chemical composition, or if we wanted to, we could actually dive in even deeper into the tensile strength drop weight tear test, but I've already shown that on another webinar, so we won't do that right now. We're going to go up to the multi-joint, and from that perspective, now that it's a multi-joint, this one's a double joint, DJ, we now have the coding information because it went from raw material into a single asset. That single asset was welded from a manufacturing standpoint into a double joint, then coded. So now we've got a coded double joint. We've been able to follow it all through its lifespan, and we can go into that actual asset. And now you can see that coding information. We can quickly search any information on it. We can see its location of where it's been dropped on a pin. If the logistics supplier or one of the supply chain stakeholders has provided information on it, this can also be a rack and row if it's in a stockpile. We can export it. So to those individuals that need to be able to see a signed PDF, of course, that's still available, but we want to keep the data as usable as possible in a flat file like Excel, or at the end of a project, of course, we want to be able to get all the data into a turnover package. When we go back to related assets, just one final summary on that, we now see in this double joint, it's 2 individual assets and all the critical information for that, as well as when we go back to our summary, we can see that we have all the critical documents and data to that asset. So we've been able to mass upload the hydro test to all the assets within that overall infrastructure. We've got potential NCRs that were on that asset or assets of that type spec. We've got the overall inspection test plan. We can have the weld procedure attached. We can add photos, whether they were taken by the suppliers or potentially by the field tools, such as what you're going to see here coming up. And you can see all of those different documents associated here. We also always make the comment that you don't have to add the full attachment here. You can actually just add the URL. So for all of those that already have a great document management system where you're saying, I don't want to do that, there's duplication, there's version control implications, completely agree. Add the URL and to that system, and then make the systems work hand in hand, not duplicating efforts. Then we've got a couple other features that we're not going to go into today, but if you're interested to learn more about how we actually can log the different asset data as it comes in and show that both as the data creates the asset within the system, but also the chronological progression of that asset through its lifespan. We'd be more than happy to set up individual webinars on that, but that doesn't apply to what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is making sure we get a lot of critical, usable data into the field. So with that, I'm going to now pass it over to our partners at PCS, who we have the fortunate ability to work hand in hand with on TC Energy projects.
Great. Thanks, Jet. That's a great overview. And Jeff and I, kind of two birds of a feather, we always talk about the most important thing is to, collect the data well. That's obviously step one. But if you've done that, don't waste it. Pass it on to the other entities. They're going to leverage that data so that the integrity and the accuracy you've spent and invested early on can continue to be shepherded through the life cycle of the asset. And we're only touching manufacturing through construction. Obviously, there's a whole other component where we need to hand it off to operations, and they need to shepherd it well, and then they need to get their integrity group to do the same. So, but the theme of the day is collect it well and pass it on. So let's see if I can dive into the screen share here. All right, looks to be working. So when it gets to construction, this is typically a place where digital data is not well found. So it's definitely an opportunity to collect more information more accurately, and ultimately do that, build that digital twin that operations can rely on. Let's kind of back up a little bit just to tell you a quick intro of PCS, who we are and how we're here talking about this. Essentially, PCS is an engineering project management consulting firm to the pipeline industry. We had a range of different business units and capabilities. Fundamentally, I like to summarize it as, if you want to build a pipeline, we pretty much can do everything but be the actual contractor or be the right-of-way firm. But the reason that led us to talk about technology is we always kept asking the question, like, how do we do this better for ourselves? And that's kind of, at the end of the day, that's what PCS is kind of what we're really about. We just solve problems, particularly in the midstream and pipeline industry, but energy infrastructure in general. We just figure out how to do things. So we started building technology for ourselves to improve how we do our own processes and how we deliver our own results. And that kind of grew into its own business unit. And so that's kind of where we are today, with Epilogue as our construction management solution that we're promoting and providing to the industry to solve that problem of digital data capture during construction, to both help the construction process itself as well as to help the life cycle of that asset. Kind of on that front, that technology component that's grown out of that is kind of grown significantly. We're billions of dollars worth of capital assets that we have managed through this solution of Epilogue, and currently have thousands of users both in the field and on the desktop leveraging this solution to build assets across North America. And we'll kind of dive into how we do that, how we came across that, and how the system takes up from the data that Vintri has shepherded and move it on through construction, even add value to it, and then ultimately pass it on for operations to leverage and never lose the initial traceability established from manufacturing. So to kind of back up, let's just talk about why digitization during construction is a problem. It's because we don't really do it. And typical construction reporting, I know, and I've been doing this long enough to know that it's I really think we're at a tipping point where this kind of component of the slide, I don't really need to make a hard press on. Like, everyone agrees digitization is good, but just to recognize what we are doing, we, for the most part, as an industry, are predominantly collecting information, whether handwritten or, keyed in via Excel or Word, key information about progress, about costs, about actual as-built information, quality information, welder qualifications, parameters, etc. In most cases, Word or Excel reports keyed in on a laptop, emailed in, sometimes even printed, handed in, scanned, sent back to a document management system. But I can go through a number of reasons why there is just poor data quality through this method. The other thing I like to talk about a lot is keep in mind, like, who's doing the data collection. So, inspection is important. Quality control is very important. We've hired people who know the work, who have hopefully, in many cases, done the work, can observe and oversee exactly what is needed for it to comply with the design documents and requirements, procedures, regulatory requirements. But to be quite honest, this group of people was not hired because they were great data collectors. They were hired for all those other skills. So when we ask them to level up their data collection because regulatory requirements, are insisting upon it, basically, if you can't show me a document or data that said you did it, you didn't do it. You can't just tell me I had a 30-year veteran out there watching it. So we have to figure out a way to take these extremely skilled and expert, construction personnel and make them great data collectors. And so that's really the big challenge that previous methodologies never really addressed. And that's kind of one of the things we wanted to take into and think about as we look to data collection for construction. So what is Epilogue? Epilogue, again, is a construction management solution. It comprises of a number of components. And this identifies both those components as well as the workflow and the concept behind the data, and what we want to take in and what we want to produce out. The right-hand side of the screen basically represents everything everybody wants. I mean, every project manager, director, VP, operations, they want dashboards showing exactly where they stand, maps they can point to exactly when the last weld was made. They want all their documents lined up, perfectly complete, no holes. Everything can be found when they want to find it. They want photos that, like, I know where it belongs, when it was taken. If I have an issue in an area, I could find photos. They want to be able to say that they were good stewards of the environment and prove it. Here's the requirements we had. Here's how we met them. Same thing with right-of-way. They want to say they were good stewards of the land that they were crossing. Here's what we agreed to do on your property. Here's all the proof that we did it. We want to shepherd those materials, both from a, like a traceability perspective, as well as a cost and a supply chain for surplus, managing surplus well, not overusing materials, not losing materials. And then at the end of the day, we want to learn and get better. We want to take all this data and we want to be able to say, what were trends or issues that we could have foreseen because we now know about them, that we can get better. We can get more cost effective, improve schedule delays, minimize how much extra material we purchase, etc. So we want the right-hand side, but you can't just get the right-hand side. The right-hand side comes out when you think all the way back to the beginning, and that kind of goes all the way back to what Jeff was talking about. You have to start by collecting the requirements of the project. So you have to know exactly what you're trying to do. So the design documentation, the requirements, the specs, the procedures, you got to bring that into a system so that you can compare what you actually do against what you intended to do. So that's where Epilogue starts, is bringing in the design requirements. What did we say? What are our construction specifications? I mean, even simple things like, how many spreads are we going to have? Let's make sure we only have 3 choices if there's only 3 spreads. How many facilities? Like, we want to load into the system all of the key components that we know are intended to be built or intended to be adhered to. And then that allows us to minimize the choices and the keyed inputs by those construction personnel. It also allows us to provide validations or logic against what we expected to happen. And that is critical for, again, dialing up the accuracy of the data so that the right-hand side actually means something. Then we want to put it all in one place. It's great to collect tons of data, We generally don't have a problem collecting. It's not the amount of data, it's organizing it in a way where it's accessible. So we need to kind of centralize it in a hub, and that's what Epilogue functions as. And we'll look at it live as a hub where all of that content on the right I can get to from one place. So I can have a full picture of what happened to my project during construction, and then be able to, importantly, pass that on to systems of record or other operation or operator systems, so that they can continue to leverage what is truly, hopefully, a construction digital twin from this point forward. So I've kind of been weaving it in, but I really want to back up and kind of talk about some key components of digitization that offer significant benefits, and kind of throw some buzzwords out there just to kind of like, kind of get us all on the same page. So first fun, data nerd buzzword is data standardization. And what this basically means is calling a spade a spade. From the beginning of the project, if you establish that you're going to, manage a piece of digital information, let's all name it the same thing. Let's all call it the same thing. Let's all ensure that it has all the same properties. This is built in throughout, Vintri's solution. It was woven in throughout all of that. Coding was a specific field and it only has certain properties that you could select. And you couldn't say FBE and fusion bonded epoxy and, whatever other options. That way you always called it the same thing throughout the project, which allows you to aggregate, compare, contrast, and get all the analytics that you want on the other end. The next one is data accuracy. And the big component of why we want to take that data from Vintri and absorb it is because keyed information or transcription error is one of the #1 ways to ruin great data quality set of quality data. Humans are humans. We're always going to be that way. If you let us type something in, write something down, we're going to make a mistake. This is also where barcodes are vital too, in that even if all that data was perfectly tracked to a unique material identifier, all they had to do was write down an 8-digit character and everything else would, be transferred. That is a great opportunity for a mistake. And there's tons of research on it. Just trust me, it's hard for humans to write down data really well. So anything we can do to avoid transcription, to use pre-fills, to use validations to say, hey, this doesn't look right, this is out of spec, this is beyond what we anticipated, to say you forgot to fill this section of the form out, please go back and do so, dials up the data accuracy and does it in a way where we don't actually just drill on the inspectors and field personnel and say, hey, do a better job. You should write down more, spend more time on your documentation, double check it. We can do it intelligently with technology. And the reason we want those first two things is those first two things are the key foundation to what ultimately we want to get, which is the analytics. We want to get the analytics so we can understand where we stand on the project. Are we ahead or behind schedule? Are we ahead or behind cost? Was there an issue in this location? Have we resolved it? And then ultimately build that digital twin. Digital twin is another fun buzzword, but it basically means, do I have a copy digitally of what we built physically? Does my digital footprint match my physical footprint? And when you have that thing, that's when you have an accurate piece of information to analyze, shepherd, and use for the life of the asset in operations. So these are all fun, cool buzzwords, but let's look at it live. So let me switch and go to a live example of Epilogue. So here's Epilogue's website that is the hub and the central hub for a project. This is kind of mimicking an operator's homepage, and they can have different projects that they can navigate to as they go to construction. So I'll dive into one sample project. And in this project, you want this to be a hub for everything that you have going on in the project. You have your documents, whether they come from forms or uploaded documents. You have photos, you have dashboards, you have the ability to search everything, and then a map. And I'll show you kind of all these components as we break them down. First one I kind of want to dive into would be dashboards. So if you want to take a look at this daily progress report, this is aggregated from all the individual inspectors on a daily basis, no matter how many you have. And the key here is that data standardization, where if everyone calls it trenching, they don't call it ditching or trenching, we can automatically aggregate and build the daily progress report. then you can visualize this in different ways. So you can see percent completes as bar charts. It's a lot easier to see your percent completes, but the one I actually like the most, that when you kind of get into the weeds, is the matrix view. So this is showing you your progress, when it occurred, on which day. So you can really kind of dial down and see when progress is occurring on which activities. Does it align with your expectations? Do the totals match up to what you expected to find? You can really kind of visualize, or construction from the office, and kind of get into the weeds of what's happening. But I also want to back up. I'm going to pull my tablet up a second. It's like, okay, this is great. Everybody wants these dashboards, but show me practically how an inspector actually gets good enough data for you to have a dashboard here, when I can sit here and trust that 1,974 meters of bending or feet of bending, whatever unit you're tracking, is accurate on June 22nd. I mean, that's great, but I got to be able to trust this. So let me pull my tablet up on my screen real quick and walk through how we can help an inspector or field personnel become an even better data collector. And I will flip this sideways so we can see it. So our tool is built on a paper space environment on purpose. I'm an office-based engineer by education. I would love to collect things in a more dynamic, digital, less paper-like world. But this is a hard lesson learned, that in today, to get that person comfortable, a paper-like environment is really critical and helps a lot. But we can still do all the different intelligent things that digitization offers. So when I go to click project, only the projects that I'm able to see are available. And once I select my project, I can go and I get fewer and fewer choices as I go along. So an example of that would be, as I click in AFE and let my tablet catch up, there's only one choice. If there were more, there would be two choices. I go to click in spread, only the spreads or facilities that are part of that project are available. Again, using data standardization under weather, instead of everybody typing whatever they want, good, clear, warm, hot. We set a set of drop downs that are manageable, but then everyone uses the same weather data, and then we can analyze it then and aggregate it. If there's only one contractor, I don't want them typing that in. I want to have them have one choice. So all of these components are intelligently filtering down and down and down because of previous selections. So we're basically forcing that field personnel to be an even better data collector, because we're not giving them many options. We already put their name on there for them, by the way. We put the date. We automatically generated a report number that's guaranteed to be unique. They can't accidentally save over yesterday's report. And if you look at the top, we even named the form for them. We gave it the project name, the spread they chose, the type of form it is, the date, their initials, and the report number. So they don't even have to worry about naming the form anymore. And then we're going to file it for them when it's all said and done as well. So we're really trying to focus on, if we make it easy for them to collect the information, we can actually have them collect more information, which everybody wants. We make their job easier, and we get the information at the end of the day in a form and a searchable manner that's usable. So if I want to go track some progress, I can click on a task, and only the tasks that we're tracking for this project, whether that's you're tracking it for schedule reasons or cost reasons or a choice. So you can have things in here that have no cost implication or things that do. So if I'll just select clearing, and then in station numbers, this one's set up for a more US format, but we do US or metric. We don't want them to worry about how to format the station number, and we also do not want them to add or subtract. We'd like to do that for them. So these are simple little things that increase the quality and the accuracy. And the other thing that we do is, once this is submitted and we aggregate all the data, we automatically never double count an overlapped set of progress for the same station value. And we also flag all gaps in a dashboard that the construction managers can see, because we have no idea if a gap is a data gap, in other words, a fat finger or a mistake made in data collection, or a physical gap of construction. But we want to make that easy for you to identify. Unit or pay items are also a really big item that can cost a lot and can get out of control in a project. And this makes it much easier to track. You only have the unit items that are part of your contract here. And when you select something, the unit of measure that item is measured against is automatically filled out. So like if I did something different and I select a different item, it would be a different unit of measure. And if I start a row here, it's going to force me to finish it. If I tried to complete this form right now, it would tell me that I haven't filled out all the information. So we can intelligently ensure that if they start something, they finish the information. And then ultimately on the pictures. You can obviously use your camera live or go to a photo library. I'll just pick an older photo. And it actually pulls the date from that photo, so you can tell that I picked a much older photo. And they can also come in here and sketch. So if they wanted to come in and indicate a station value or circle an issue or whatever that is, they can sketch, they can assign a GPS location to it, they can put some comments, and all of this would be attached and associated to this photo so that you can find it. So when this photo is submitted, we know who took it, where they took it, when they took it, we know what description they gave to it and what form it came from. So that makes a photo, instead of being a JPEG named IMG 1002, and who knows what's on there, how do I find it or know what it's taking? We have so much more context to every photo. Another example of data accuracy and data standardization would be in welding. And this is where we can leverage all that material data that Vintri had shepherded. So let me just go ahead and quickly skip through some things. I'll go ahead and set my header, which tells me which project and which data set to leverage. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that for us right here. And then I can show how scanning a barcode like Vintri has on a pipe, we can take all that data direct from them and leverage it in any form, in this case, a welding form, to ensure that someone collects something accurately. So when I go to click on Asset ID, it brings up a barcode scanner. And if that barcode, in that case, is a demo set, but if it were a Vintri barcode and they had loaded the data like they do in the system that we were collaborating with, all that data that they had shepherded from the manufacturer fills out. So that inspector does not inaccurately grab a heat number or wall thickness or any values. They just scan a barcode and it fills it out. They can even, if barcodes are used for welds, you can leverage barcodes for welds. So here's kind of an example of a weld number. So you don't even have to write down weld numbers, which we're a pretty big fan of. And then finally on the downstream asset, and I'm not doing the whole weld form just to save time, I'm just kind of showing that different material data can come in. I'll pick up a different barcode, come up here, grab that one, and similarly, the asset information comes in. So this goes back to tying everything together. So somebody, like in Vintri's case, shepherds and provides that accurate, traceable, verifiable, and complete data that you can trust. And then we don't want to key a thing in about that. We want to pass that data on to that inspector with zero transcription. And that barcode and that backend data that's loaded here, that's the key to how this weld as-built form can be filled out, precisely identify the upstream and downstream assets without typing a thing. And that is really critical to getting the accuracy we want for the dashboards. So let's show some more welding focused things. Some of the fun data we can get when we track welds that well and that detailed is we can really drill down and analyze the data in a way that provides insight that we didn't used to have. So let's take if you look here and you look at down in the bottom right, that's my overall repair rate for this spread. And anybody looking at that familiar with construction will say, that is great. I'll take that every day and we're going to have a great project if we hit that. And that is true. And that is mostly true because you can see here, this is actually their weld type for mechanized welding. Most of the welds are mechanized. And in that case, the repair rate overall looks great. But if we pivot the data a little bit, make sure I'm still logged in here. Sometimes I get timed out. We pivot the data a little bit and focus on a weld type that's manual. You can see that my weld reject rate is quite different. And we would expect it to go up, but it's kind of probably trending in the area of like 7%. I wouldn't, but what you can know and the insight you can gain by seeing things like this as you manage a project is you can know that as we get to the end of the project, where we're going to have fewer and fewer mechanized, but far more manual welds and tie-ins and things like that, I need to project a higher reject rate that will affect my scheduling. I can't project forward that 1.35% reject rate for the rest of the project. And you can have insight to that. Another thing you can see really quickly here is like, well, which defect type is most common? And you can see really quickly elongated slag inclusion, is the most common defect. And I can click on that and the data pivots and it's going to show me which welds actually are most common to have that. And you have your different weld types where we've actually had that defect type. And again, it's all manual welds. In this case, I know they're weld types. And the other thing we have here is welder IDs. Which welder IDs are causing most of the defects? And this pie chart shows all of them and makes it really obvious. It's actually kind of surprising. But this one welder contributed 16% of all defects. And I know everyone construction oriented is going to go, oh, well, that person would have been fired. They never would have been on my job. But why did it get to 16%? I mean, that's such a high number. Obviously, you can see and you can measure and you can see what kind of welds or where they welded, or maybe we need to go double check those welds. But you can do that and you can drill down and pivot the data and get more use out of it. Let's bring up another example on the material side. Another example on the material side, once you've shepherded the data well like this and can manage it well during construction, is analyzing where your material are, where they are in the supply chain process, understanding what you have left in different locations, and kind of being able to track that. So once the data comes from Vintri, all the personnel in all the yards can track material to and from yards out to the contractor to a different person, and have an inventory report on all those locations. So in this case, if you ask the question, okay, well, what's in the leak yard? I click on the leak yard and the data down here pivots to all the assets. And you can see I have 7,888, in this case, feet of pipe in the yard. And if I ever want to see, well, when would it transfer to that yard? Each individual joint, I could click on it and it's going to pull up the specific form that tracked that joint into the yard. And you can see we've got the asset ID here. So that would be where they would have scanned that barcode and it would have loaded all the information on the left again, so they didn't type or make a mistake. Another material question you might ask is, well, where are all my induction bends? Just pivot the dashboard, flip to an induction bend. And here you can see, okay, most of them are still at the manufacturer. They've ordered, but they haven't come. And I've got 60 in the county line yard. If I click on the county line yard, it pivots down to which particular bends do I have in that yard and how many of each do I have. And then the next question that could be helpful to ask is, I can even take one of those assets that we scanned earlier and you could say, where is it right now in construction? So if I come in and put an asset ID in construction and search on it, you can see it's on the right of way on spread 2. It was transferred out to the right of way on spread 2. Or put in another ID. And this one's still in the leak yard as the last known location. So kind of, again, under that premise that Jeff talked about, collect it accurately, collect it well, and then shepherd it throughout the project. The last example I'll show is kind of putting it all together on a map. What I love about the map, I'm a very visual person like Jeff, is none of us, I believe, pretty sure on this call, are actually active on this particular project. I'll leave it unnamed, but we really quickly can figure out exactly where it is in construction. So you can see down the right, blue is hydro test, red is backfill, green's firing line, and then kind of the orange color is grade. We actually track every individual activity, but I like to focus on these 4. It's kind of the big 4 moments in construction. They're easy kind of pinpoint. So you can see what you've hydro tested. You can see where they backfilled. You can see right here, they've welded, but they haven't backfilled in this last little section, and they're basically welded out. And in a quick instant, we have a real quick picture of exactly where this project stands in construction. But we can dive deeper. So any design details that you could have obviously in the background. You can drill down nice and close to the project, and all these dots start to pop up. These are the actual photos that were taken. And if hey, I need a photo in this area, you can see actually taking a photo of the pipe on the skids on the side of the right of way. It makes sense. Look, it's not in its final location. It's off to the side. Or I can click on the pipeline anywhere, and the forms that were filled out about that particular section of the pipeline, in this case, the firing line form or the grading form or the hydrostatic testing form, are filled out how much they did, start and stop, when it was completed. So all this detail you can drill into, and the map makes that possible. So I have one last slide that I want to share to kind of talk about, well, what do you do? This is great. I like it. What do I do to move forward? And we'll kind of kick off the question and answer with this too. So my advice, if you're watching this and you're thinking, okay, this is great. Of course, who doesn't want a full digital twin? Everything's accurate. That looks great. Can I have that tomorrow? And the answer is yes, we can move that way, but start small. Take one small step. Have that end goal of that full digital picture that you want to get, but you got to figure out what the step is for your organization. It might not be to go all the way. You take one step at a time, and then definitely learn from those with more bruises. There are a lot of hard lessons learned out there about how to get this to work. I shared some of those nuggets about the paper-like experience, designing for inspectors in mind. By the way, those did not come because we were geniuses from the beginning. The other thing I always like to recommend is plan a pilot project and live by the phrase, for the pilot, not forever. Don't do everything in that pilot. Just have a narrow focus of what you want to achieve it well, and then move forward. And then the other advice is do not try to digitize a process that does not exist. A lot of people see digitization like, oh, well, we could also do this, or we could also do that. And if your organization doesn't already have systems in place to collect that information, manage it, QC it, etc., jumping right into the digitization game and doing a new process at the same time is a good recipe for more challenges than you need. Just digitize something you're already doing and make it better, and then add on those new processes later. And then the last one is be agile. What you think how you're going to do it and why you're going to do it is going to change. You definitely need to take small little bites, and at each step evaluate what the next one should be, so that you can have an agile mindset to get to your end goal, which is a full digital picture that you can shepherd on for the life of the asset. So thank you for your time. And Jeff, I'll turn it back to you to curate the questions.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Brett. Many of you that may know me might have been surprised at the beginning why I was going through stuff so quickly and going, oh, I won't show that, I won't show that. It's because Brett had so much great information that we wanted to make sure we could share with you. And Brett, I think you're officially the king of the demos. Like, that was impressive to be able to take in all of that and show us so much in such a compact amount of time. I will quickly say, we've got a couple comments. We really want some questions. There's over 30 people, so I'm sure you have some question or two that you can throw into the chat. While I wait for some questions to come in, Brett, you made some amazing points around the shepherding, right? And that's standardization. So step one, standardization. Step two, the accuracy. So I'll quickly just show back to my side. From the core standpoint, the way Vintri is able to help shepherd that is our platform's translation. Because what Brett was making a great point around is when you get early on a project and you decide as a project, everyone's going to use the same terminology and the same terms. And like Brett showed, you're going to have drop-down menus that eliminate the opportunity to create custom phrases or custom terms. The factor that goes into that before it ever gets to construction is that you're going to use dozens of suppliers and manufacturers, and trying to get them all on one page in a standardized material manifest is a challenge that we've been tackling for 8 years. And realistically, we realize that there is not going to be one perfect PODS or Esri data model that everyone finally takes on. Everyone is going to have a little bit of a nuance here and there. So a big part of core is the ability to translate that manufacturing data, get it into a single material manifest that is standardized for the whole project, so that, like Brett said, the go forward within the project can be that translation. So we map everything from the supplier's information to a standard data model. And then for each operator, no operator wants to adopt just this terminology. They already have their terminology, like Brett said. So we then can map this column over into their terms, so that everyone in the project has seen an item in the term that they're used to. They don't have to have some kind of legend in their back pocket or on their desk kind of thing. And then the other thing that I would say on the accuracy side is we have, from a perspective of the shepherding, is we also have just a quick showcase of what that accuracy and what that iterative process looks like. So I'm going to bring up project 4. It's a small one here, but this is an iterative approach to taking in all the manufacturing data. And let's just visualize that we're getting the data out to Brett's system, Epilogue, I should say. We're getting it in week 6 or week 7. So what we're able to do is, by working with all the manufacturers, is take the traceability critical issues, the engineering non-conformance issues, flag them, and help the supply chain bring all of those down, so that by the time we're hitting loadout of materials and we're sending the master material manifest to everyone within the project, they know they can trust that data. So when Brett's talking about either typing in the stencil or scanning a QR code or scanning a barcode, the trust is because there's been a digital inspection through the shepherding process of that. So there's just one quick example of this is what we try to do on every project: get in early and get all the data accurate before it hits a rail car, before it hits a boat, before it hits a truck, and goes out to those construction sites. So those are just two highlights of two great points that Brett brought up around the shepherding. I really like that term, the data shepherding. So we have one question here. Do the regulations distinguish between material management and weld management? Presume both need to be documented in tight detail. So I can speak specifically to the material management and my one slide that I shared earlier. So there is specific components in CSA, API, PHMSA rules, DNV-GL, all that talks around the material records and having those details. And like I said, the most recent upgrade that will take effect January 1, 2021 is to have a great deal of record materials and traceable, verifiable, complete, and accurate material data for all PHMSA regulated midstream. CSA Z662 already has a lot of that, and then the CER came out with a traceability best practice, as well as local regulatory bodies put a lot of emphasis on know your asset. So that is from the material side. Brett, I'll let you answer the weld side.
Great. Welding is complicated too, and most of it is focused around the quality of the weld itself. From a traceability perspective, the focus is on the material. What do we know the material properties? We have to know the material properties because that dictates what type of welding procedure we use. And then if we have a certain welding procedure that we said we're going to use, can you prove that you followed the key parameters of that procedure? So kind of everything kind of trickles forward. So if you don't have the right material properties, you could use the wrong procedure. And if you use the wrong procedure, you have incorrect welding from a regulatory standpoint. So the critical component is start with the material. You have to get it well. And then the added component on weld management is, okay, so if you know you have the right material, you then have to prove that you followed the procedure that you identified for yourself. The regulatory bodies allow you to establish the procedures within the API framework. There's a lot of wiggle room, and most operator procedures dial that in to a very specific set of parameters, and then they hold you to those parameters. So if you write it down that you're going to do it, they hold you to that requirement. But the key is to know which procedure you're using. You have to have the right material.
Perfect. Thank you. So we've got another one that came in as a private question. What's required to implement this kind of pairing of solutions? What's the level of effort? So, I mean, Brett really brought up a great point, and it reiterates what TC Energy in our previous presentation together with our partners said: take it one bite at a time, as Brett said, one step at a time. So, I mean, I know for us, a lot of initial projects are just identifying a small section replacement or a smaller project where the amount of suppliers, the amount of team members and stakeholders to get on board is a lot smaller. And realistically, we've been put on projects where coding is already 60% completed. It's hard to get everyone on the same page about their data requirements at that point. But if you've got good suppliers, they'll still hand over their data in a small subset and still want to show to you as an operator that they're doing all of the requirements from a regulatory standpoint. You've already, the second you've purchased material, you've purchased data. So the timeliness of how quickly and how fast we can get that data standardized and accurate so that it gets to the field is a little bit more stressful. But realistically, we've been engaged on a project, 60% coding's done. We get introduced to one main point of contact. They CC us on the projects, and we run with everything. So it's one person's 5 emails, and we're off to the races. If you want the QR code, barcode solutions, if your suppliers don't have those, as Brett mentioned, Vintri has worked with companies like Enbridge, TC, Shawcor to build kind of a universal QR code and barcode on one label that can handle multiple years of a stockpile. So that can be bought by anyone. They don't have to go through Vintri, and those usually take about 6 weeks procurement lag time. So that's a twofold from our side. We can get on a week later without barcodes. Barcodes take 6 weeks to get out to a coder. Brett, what about yourself?
Great. So again, it varies, but to give people the range, we have a set of existing standard construction forms that obviously attempt what we believe comply with most operators' requirements. We've seen a lot of operator forms. We've kind of aggregated them. So basically, if you go out of the box without those set of forms that are configured with dashboards, I say 6 weeks, but it's not 6 weeks of work. It'll be 6 weeks and we'll be on your construction project. We'll have all your inspectors trained. We'll have inputted all your project parameters. We'll have worked with you. We've established the workflow to your document management system, and we're off and running. So for us, it's 6 weeks. And then obviously we allow people to customize Epilogue. And that is just an independent, one-off discussion about what level do you want to just have a couple of your forms in? Do you want to holistically swap out every single form for your set of construction data collection? Do you want unique workflows? All of that is possible. And in that conversation, it's just we then go into our professional services and our custom development and custom forms. And we would have those conversations with you and determine schedule and scope at that point.
Kind of take a bite of the elephant or try to eat half the elephant at once, right, Brett?
And then even if we have someone who says, I want full custom, that's kind of going back to the pilot. We would recommend, hey, let's just do a pilot with like what we have out of the box because we can get it out there quick. You're going to learn so much. You're going to learn where your existing field personnel are good at doing things and not good at doing things that you didn't realize. You're going to learn what dashboards you like and don't like. And then let's talk about that custom implementation. I mean, we can do it the other way, but I would highly advise, let's just do a quick pilot, small project, knock it out, and then let's have a lessons learned, and let's let that drive the custom development if you're going down that path.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, for us, it's also even you can do just a subsection of the materials, right? The pipe joints, for the most part, is the highest quantity on any project outside of facilities, of course, but even facilities is pretty high. So you can even just do the bare steel, the coated steel, and the logistics of the steel for material standardization and accuracy, and then grow into your manufactured assets like the induction bends, the bar tees, and then move into the forge assets like your elbows, fittings, valves, flanges, and your pump stations and so forth. So we have a lot of customers that took that approach one step at a time. They did one project just on the pipe, then a project on the pipe bends, valve assemblies, and so forth, and grow it iteratively so that it's not a huge change management initiative by any means. We've got another good question. I'll let you go first, Brett. In the what are some of the biggest challenges, obstacles you face in implementation adoption?
That's a great one. They're pretty much all the same for any technology or change management adoption and that fun little adoption curve and everything else. The key thing, though, this is the biggest one, is that within the organization, whoever is the champion of this, that they have the authority to execute the scope. So, for example, some people will champion it, but they want us to, if they don't have a Vintri, they want us to work with their materials people and their supply chain, and they want us to get data over to their GIS, and all these other things are possible. But if they don't own that relationship and that responsibility, setting up all those collaborations from the get-go tend to be the biggest challenge. So the biggest hurdle we have is keeping it small enough where the person who's championing it focuses on the things that they have within their control to solve, and then let's organically grow it through our proof of results to the others. I can't tell you how many conversations people see the potential. They're like, oh, I could throw this data in, and supply chain could use this, and everybody, and it's great. That's true. We love that. I love that, but it also scares me so much because we won't get off the ground if in most operators when everyone's siloed and they have their own budgets and their own. So the organizational biggest implementation is the organizational will aligns up with the scope.
Yeah, digital innovation scope creep, and never getting off the ground. I'm going to answer that, but I think I can answer it by also answering Sean's question of, do you find that suppliers add a surcharge to customize the information format to match the project standard? So that was one of our early obstacles, Sean. So if Vintri works with its partners right from the material requests stage, so before the RFP can even go out, we can help equip the operator with the data templates they want. So we give them a huge list of data templates that are available out there, best practices across 45 projects, across $35 billion worth of infrastructure that we've been on. We say, hey, this is what's available to you. You pick which ones you want. We, of course, highlight, depending on the area they're in, of which ones meet certain codes and regulatory requirements. But then there's a lot of nice to haves to what we're talking about. There's a lot of items that you can ask the supplier for that doesn't create like workflow stoppage today, but everyone's talking about AI machine learning. Why not get that from the supplier today so that 5 years from now you can actually feed those great tools down the line? So with that, if you don't get in before the PO, we've had 3 cases across 45 projects where the supplier pushed back and asked for a surcharge. One was less than $100 on, I think there were $13,000 induction bends, so $100 per induction bend. And they didn't push back on the data, they pushed back on having to serialize how they tagged their bends. It was just going to add an extra person to it. Another supplier pushed back and said they needed one person to help clean up all the data for 2 weeks. It was a couple $100 million project, and the surcharge, I think, came out to less than $10,000. And when they brought it up to that owner operator, they came to an agreement to work together on it. And then we had one that really pushed back, and they said, no, it wasn't in the PO, we're not doing it. Unfortunately, they didn't show that they were a stakeholder and a partner to that owner operator, and we were on the next project, they weren't. So yes, they can push back, but Brett brought it up. We're past the tipping point. Digital transformation's here. An owner operator buys the data just as much as they buy the asset. So requesting the data in a good format, in a good frequency, and putting in a fulfillment clause is kind of becoming the norm, not just Vintri customers. We see it across all operators that projects we're not on, that the suppliers are phoning us up and saying, hey, how are we going to be compliant with this? You guys must have made these policies or these procedures. We go, no, but oh, that's a good one. So it's the transformation's there. It's coming. Another obstacle that we have is similar to Brett. We have one group that sees their path, their value. They're going to create a business case and an ROI document at the end of the pilot. And then we have 4 other groups that say, what about this? What about this? What about this? And while your initial thought is, oh, this will add so much to the ROI document to get this implemented at a bigger scale, the more cooks you let in the kitchen, the more chance you have of the true value of the solution not being seen on that pilot. So really, we try to have our champion group own our membership, and then show little samples of benefits to the other groups, but not try to make everyone happy on the first pilot, because it just gets muddy, just way too muddy. Another question. So in the future, are you thinking of transitioning into the renewable energy consulting? Don't know about the last word, consulting, but I will say that we've built our platform and our solution to be asset agnostic. So right now we're focused on all energy infrastructure. We get used the most for anything that is steel based because of the importance of that material test report and its birth certificate being associated to it throughout the lifespan of it in an asset. But we have done pilots around electrical and other all components, turbo machinery, electrical, and whatnot. So yes, every industry that is building major infrastructure needs better data. The tool is built for them. Our dev team loves to laugh that if someone needed traceability and better material data on a banana, our platform's built to be able to swing that up tomorrow. But right now we as a team are focused on all energy infrastructure. What about yourself, Brett?
I would agree with that, Jeff. And again, same thing. The midstream and the pipeline industry has the greatest demand for, there's in the construction side, there's hundreds of people, thousands in some cases, active on a project at a time. So one day of delay or one day's worth of costs adds up and justifies a digitization effort. Whereas that's not really as true on other infrastructure. But just like you, we are tracking widgets. So you can change in the drop down, instead of tracking, joints of pipe, you can track spans in the case, or meters or feet of electrical transmission, or number of solar arrays installed. So yes, we are on board with, as I kind of always put it, we want to be able to support the construction of whatever energy infrastructure the world needs. Right now, the biggest demand and the biggest number of dollars and humans and digital data footprint being collected is in pipelines. But we're going to have to transition. We're not going to send our energy through steel pipes forever. So yes, we want to be a part of that transition.
Perfect. Well, we're 6 minutes past the hour. We're very fortunate. We still have most of you still joined in. So quick reminder, thank you so much, Brett, for joining us today and showcasing how Shepherd's material data can go into these great solutions and make sure your solution, your team, make sure that that valuable, usable data truly gets turned into information and insight. So that was fantastic. And for anyone that's interested, you can connect with us. If you've got information specifically for Brett, the Vintri team will make sure it gets to him as well. This video, if you want to share it with anyone, will be put on Vintri's YouTube channel. So you can pass it along, share it that way. As a registrant, you will get a link of the video directly to. That's through Webinar Jam. It'll ask for your, if you pass it on through that, it'll ask for some additional information. So if you don't feel like doing that and giving an email over, just go to the YouTube channel. We've got more information for you, and we've got direct proposals and presentations that are available at your request. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being interested in the digital transformation of the midstream industry and the value of making sure this data is usable and accurate, accessible, and traceable throughout the entire lifespan of the energy infrastructure. Thank you so much, Brett.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone.
Perfect. Okay, have a great day and stay safe, everyone.
Bye.